My girlfriend used my credit to fund her business, so I reported her fraud, pressed charges, and bought her company at auction for pennies Letarium, a 28-year-old guy. And I thought I had found my forever with my girlfriend, Emily. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. Dinners together, weekend trips, those long talks at 2 a.m. where she'd dream out loud about our future. She had this fiery ambition that drew me in always, talking about how she was destined to own her own business one day, how she'd never settle for the ordinary life her parents lived. I admired that about her. It felt exciting, like I was standing next to someone who wanted to climb higher and drag me along with her in those early days. I trusted her with everything, my time, my secrets, even parts of myself I'd never shown anyone before. I remember sitting on my old beige couch, her head resting on my chest, when she whispered, "One day you'll be proud you believed in me." Her words stuck with me, almost like a promise carved into my mind. I didn't know then how much weight that promise would carry. My friends sometimes joked that she seemed a little too focused on money, but I brushed it off. I told them, she's just motivated. She wants more out of life, that's all. And deep down, I wanted to be the man who supported her dreams, who gave her the stability to reach the stars she was chasing. The air around us always buzzed with her plans: coffee shops, boutiques, online ventures. I was hooked on her confidence, convinced it was just a matter of time before one of those ideas turned into something big. I told myself, love meant trust. And trust meant not asking too many questions, but blind trust has a way of turning into a weapon in the wrong hands. And Emily, she was about to prove just how dangerous that could be. It started small, almost harmless. One night, while we were lying in bed, scrolling through our phones, Emily turned to me and asked, "What's your credit score, by the way?" She said it so casually, like someone asking about the weather. I laughed at first, not really sure why she'd care, and told her the number. She nodded thoughtfully, eyes narrowing for just a second before she smiled and said, "That's really good. You've been responsible." At the time, it felt like a compliment. Looking back, it was the beginning of a test. Over the next few weeks, she sprinkled more questions into our conversations. Do you have any student loans left? How much do you usually put on your credit card each month? Would your bank approve you for something bigger if you ever wanted to buy a house? I thought she was just being serious about our future, about the kind of life we might build together. I told myself that these were the conversations couples had when they were thinking long term. But there was something about the way she asked, how her voice softened and her hand would rest on mine when she wanted a more detailed answer. It was calculated. She never pressured me outright, but it was like she was drawing a map in her head, piece by piece, of what resources I had at my disposal. I brushed off the small warnings in my gut. When my buddy joked, "Man, she sounds more interested in your wallet than your heart," I defended her instantly. I said, "No, she's just practical. She doesn't want us struggling like her parents did." I believed my own excuses, because the alternative, that she might be looking at me as a stepping stone, was too painful to accept. I didn't know it then, but Emily was planting seeds. And soon, those seeds would grow into something much darker than I ever imagined. A few months later, Emily came home buzzing with excitement. I could tell from the second she walked through the door, her eyes lit up, her hands moving fast as she spoke. "I've got it. This is it. My big break," she said, practically bouncing as she dropped her purse on the table. She launched into her idea about opening a boutique, clothing, accessories, the whole girl boss dream. She painted pictures, with her words, racks of unique fashion pieces, women lining up to buy her carefully curated styles, a brand that could explode online. She kept saying things like, "It's a can't-fail business. Trust me, I've run the numbers." At first, I smiled, happy to see her so passionate, but then she dropped the line that made my stomach twist. "I just need a little help to get it started." She talked about investors who were interested but needed to see some initial capital. She framed it like the only thing standing between her and success was a short financial bridge one I could easily provide. I hesitated, my throat felt dry as I asked, "How much are we talking?" Emily didn't flinch. She leaned in, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Nothing crazy, just a line of credit in your name. They'll approve you in a second. Once the shop takes off, we'll pay it off right away. It's an investment in our future." When I said I wasn't sure, she tilted her head, her eyes glassy like she was about to cry. "Don't you believe in me?" In us? That one line crushed my resistance. I wanted her to know I supported her, that I wasn't like the people who doubted her all her life. So, against my better judgment, I signed the papers. I let her use my credit line. And as I handed over that power, I didn't realize I was also handing her the keys to dismantle my trust. Piece by piece, at first. I tried to convince myself everything was fine. I told myself it was normal for new businesses to have expenses, that the late nights Emily spent working on her laptop meant progress. But then the credit card statements started coming in, and I couldn't ignore the numbers staring back at me. There were charges for high-end restaurants, luxury handbags, spa packages, things that had nothing to do with a boutique. My chest tightened every time I opened the mailbox, my palms sweating as I unfolded those crisp, white envelopes. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the smell of takeout still lingering in the air, as I asked carefully, "Hey Em, what's this charge at Louis Vuitton?" She barely looked up from her phone. "Networking. You have to look the part to succeed." When I pressed, she sighed and rolled her eyes. "Babe, you're stressing too much. Profit is coming soon. Don't ruin this with your negativity." Her words cut deep because they made me feel guilty for even asking, like I wasn't being supportive enough. I swallowed my doubts, telling myself she knew what she was doing. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge, I'd stare at the ceiling and feel this knot in my stomach growing tighter. Every swipe of that card, every business expense she justified, pushed me closer to a truth I didn't want to face, that I was being used. Yet I stayed silent, too afraid that confronting her would mean losing her. And in my silence, the debt piled higher, threatening to bury me alive. One night, after Emily had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room with my laptop. My heart was racing as I typed in the login for the business account she had set up. She always brushed me off when I asked to see it, saying, "It's boring. Trust me, you wouldn't understand half of it." But something inside me screamed that I needed to look. When the page finally loaded, my stomach dropped. The transactions weren't for inventory or suppliers. They were for designer boutiques, luxury hotels, and plane tickets. Thousands upon thousands of dollars poured into things that screamed indulgence, not investment. I scrolled through the endless list, my throat tightening, tears burning behind my eyes. The next morning, I confronted her, my voice trembling as I held up my phone. "Emily, what is this? These aren't business expenses. These are vacations, shopping sprees. You used my credit for this." She didn't flinch. Instead, she laughed and said, "You're just jealous because I'm building a life you could never afford on your own." Her words sliced through me, cruel and dismissive, like I was nothing more than a means to her end. I stood there frozen, shame washing over me. How had I let this happen? How had I convinced myself that love meant blind trust when all she saw was opportunity? My hands shook as I tried to argue back, but she dismissed me with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. That was the moment the illusion shattered. I wasn't her partner. I wasn't her equal. I was her financial lifeline. She had no intention of ever letting go, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of the nightmare. A week later, I got a call from the bank while I was at work. The number popped up on my screen, and my stomach immediately sank. I stepped outside into the cold air, my hands clammy as I answered. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but the words hit like a hammer. "We've noticed some suspicious activity on your account, multiple credit extensions under your name." My head spun. What extensions? "I never requested any," I stammered. The rep paused before replying, "Well, sir, we have signed documents, several. They're tied directly to your profile." When they emailed me the scanned copies, my blood ran cold. The signature on those forms, it was mine, but it wasn't. It was Emily's imitation. Close enough to fool a clerk, but jagged enough that I knew the truth instantly. She hadn't just misused the credit I gave her. She had forged my name to dig the hole even deeper. That night I stormed into our apartment, the papers shaking in my hands. "Emily, what the hell is this?" I shouted, my voice raw. She barely looked up, her face calm in a way that made me feel insane. "You're overreacting," she said flatly. "I did it for us. You'll thank me when the business explodes." I felt the walls close in, my chest heaving as tears of rage blurred my vision. You committed fraud in my name. Do you understand what this means for me? For my future?" She rolled her eyes, muttering, "You're so dramatic. If you really loved me, you'd see this as an investment, not a betrayal." That was the breaking point. My knees felt weak as I realized this wasn't just reckless spending, it was criminal. And if I didn't act soon, she wasn't just going to ruin my credit. She was going to ruin my entire life. The weeks that followed were a blur of dread. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, no numbers flashing across the screen, each one leaving a harsher voicemail than the last. Debt collectors. Some even managed to track down my workplace. I remember sitting at my desk, my manager pulling me aside with a look of concern as he whispered, "Are you in some kind of financial trouble?" They'd been calling the office line. The humiliation was unbearable. My parents even got a letter demanding payment. The shame in their voices when they asked me what was going on cut deeper than any knife. I could barely look them in the eye. It felt like my life was unraveling in public, and everyone could see the wreckage except me. When I tried to talk to Emily, hoping just maybe there'd be a shred of remorse, she turned it all back on me. "You're the one making this harder than it has to be," she snapped. "If you'd stop whining and actually support me, none of this would feel so heavy. You're dragging me down with your negativity." I stood there hollow as she twisted the knife. Betrayed, broke, and drowning in a debt I never agreed to. I felt like I had lost not only my money, but my dignity, too. Every night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining collectors knocking on my door, dragging my name through the mud, and destroying what little future I thought I had left. This was my rock bottom. I wasn't just broke, I was broken. And the worst part, the person who had put me there was the same one who had once promised to build a future with me. I don't know what finally snapped in me. Maybe it was the third call in one day from a collector, their voice sharp as they threatened legal action. Maybe it was the look of disappointment in my father's eyes when he told me, "Son, you need to get control of this before it destroys you." Or maybe it was just the crushing realization that Emily wasn't going to stop that if I stayed silent any longer. I would lose everything I had worked for. I sat alone one night, papers scattered across my kitchen table, the bitter smell of stale coffee in the air. I combed through every account statement, every forged signature, my heart pounding with equal parts rage and fear. Finally, I made the call I should have made months earlier. I contacted a lawyer when I walked into his office. My hands were shaking, my voice barely steady as I laid it all out. He listened carefully, flipping through the evidence, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. When he finally looked up, his words felt like a lifeline. "You have a strong case here. This isn't just financial irresponsibility, this is fraud. You can press charges." For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. It wasn't joy or relief, it was resolve. Emily had taken everything from me, my money, my reputation, my peace of mind. But she wasn't going to take my future that night. I sat in the car outside our apartment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I whispered to myself, "For once, I choose me." Then I stepped out, ready to do the one thing I had been too scared to do until now, fight back. When Emily found out what I had done, it was like a bomb went off in our apartment. I'll never forget the sound of her voice, sharp and venomous, echoing against the walls. "You pressed charges against me. Against me. After everything I've done for us," she screamed, her face twisted with rage. I stood there, my hands trembling, but I didn't back down. "You forged my name. You ruined my credit." "You've been lying to me this entire time," I said, my voice cracking under the weight of it all. Her anger shifted like a storm. First, fury, she hurled insults, called me vindictive, selfish, a traitor. Then, desperation. Her voice softened, tears welling in her eyes as she reached for me. "Please, baby, don't do this. I can fix it. I'll pay it all back. Just give me one more chance." For a moment, I almost caved. That was the power she always had over me, the ability to twist my guilt, to make me second-guess myself. But then I remembered the sleepless nights, the humiliation, the collectors calling my parents. I pulled my hand away. "No, this time, I'm done." That's when the threat started. She leaned in close, her voice low and venomous. "You think people will believe you? I'll ruin your reputation. I'll tell everyone you were in on it. You'll go down with me." My chest tightened. fear clawing at me, but beneath it was something stronger. Resolve. For the first time in years, I didn't let her words control me. I turned and walked out, leaving her voice shrieking behind me like the last echo of a nightmare I refused to live in anymore. The courtroom felt colder than I expected, the air heavy with the weight of everything at stake. I sat stiffly in my seat, palms damp, the sound of papers shuffling and low whispers filling the silence. When Emily walked in, she looked nothing like the woman I once trusted. Her confident smile was gone, replaced by a hard mask that barely concealed her panic. The prosecution laid out the evidence piece by piece: credit statements, forged documents, testimony from the bank. Every page felt like another nail in the coffin of the relationship I once thought was unbreakable. I kept my eyes on the table, but I could feel Emily's glare burning into me from across the room. When it was my turn to testify, my chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I looked at the judge and said, "She wasn't just careless. She betrayed me in every way that mattered. She used my trust, my name, and my future for her own gain." My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. The truth poured out of me, raw and jagged. After months of silence, Emily tried to fight back. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that I had agreed that I was turning on her because things didn't work out. But the evidence told a different story, and for once, her words couldn't twist reality. When the verdict came guilty, I felt my shoulders collapse under the flood of relief. Her reputation was shattered, her business crumbling. Justice didn't erase the pain she caused, but it gave me something I thought I'd lost forever: the chance to breathe again without fear. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. Not yet. After the trial, I thought I would never hear her name again. I wanted nothing more than to close that chapter and rebuild my life, even if it meant living with the scars of everything she'd done. But fate has a way of circling back, sometimes with an irony so sharp it almost feels cruel. A few months later, he slid a stack of papers across the desk, his eyes glinting. "You'll want to see this," he said. It was notice of an auction. Emily's failed business had officially gone under, and everything she'd built with my stolen credit was about to be liquidated. I stared at the words for what felt like forever. The same boutique she had begged me to believe in, the same one she used to bury me in debt, was now worth pennies compared to what she had burned through. My lawyer leaned back and said, "You're entitled to restitution, but if you want, you could also buy the assets yourself." The thought hit me like a jolt of electricity. I went to the auction, my heart hammering in my chest as bidders casually raised their cards. Boxes of inventory, furniture, equipment, each item that once symbolized her dream was now reduced to scraps. And then, in one decisive moment, I raised my hand and secured the entire business for a fraction of what she stole from me. Walking out that day, holding the paperwork, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. I never wanted revenge, I whispered to myself, but somehow it found me anyway. Emily had gambled everything: my trust, my future, her own integrity. And in the cruelest twist of fate, I ended up owning the ruins of the empire she destroyed. I kept the business on paper, but I never had any intention of reviving it. The name, the inventory, the hollow shell of what Emily had tried to build it, all sat there like a monument to everything I had endured. People asked me why I didn't try to salvage it, why I didn't at least sell it off for profit. But to me, it wasn't an opportunity. It was a reminder. I closed it down quietly, the way you might put an old photograph back into a box you'll never open again. I didn't need her dream. I needed peace. There were nights I'd still lie awake, replaying the lies, the forged signatures, the humiliating phone calls. But with each passing day, the weight grew lighter. For the first time in years, I could check my mail without dread, answer my phone without fear. My credit would take time to heal, but I was already healing faster than I thought possible. Looking back, I realized I had lost a lot of money. But what I gained was far more valuable. I gained clarity. I gained and most importantly, I learned that love without trust is nothing but a slow-burning fuse waiting to explode. Sometimes people ask me if I regret pressing charges. If I ever feel guilty about how things ended for Emily, my answer is always the same: no, because if I hadn't, she would have kept going until there was nothing left of me. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about survival, about taking back control from someone who tried to strip it away, And as I finally closed the door on her business and her chaos, I stepped into something far more valuable than profit: my own freedom.